In my world, you have like the dream gig,
Mhm.
playing with so many different artists, playing with a super good sounding band. You have availability to a good rehearsal place that you can more or less you can take the bike over if you prefer. I can tell while speaking to you that you are very uh, confident in your position as a bass player.
Well, I mean, do you mean within the industry?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I also mean actually, I mean you're open-minded and you're not stuck in certain circles in terms of it has to be in a certain way.
I because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was at school, and I didn't know that it was possible to become a professional musician. I had no idea. So when that happened to me, which is almost by accident, I didn't, for me, I thought to myself, well, what better way is there to make a living than doing something that you're that passionate about, that you love so much, which for me was making music, playing instruments. And to be able to have been doing it for this long, I started when I was 16 or 17, and I'm 60 now. So I've always loved doing, and I love musical instruments anyway. I think just the aesthetic of them, I think is, yeah. My tuba, you can't obviously see it. My tuba's sitting on the sofa, and it's just so beautiful. My EXO tuba, just the aesthetic of it.
Yeah, yeah,
So I've always loved instruments. I love playing them, and bearing in mind that when I got the Jules gig, I wasn't looking to be well known, high profile, famous, wealthy, none of those, and I'm none of those things anyway. The truth is no, but the fact for me is I was just glad I was still doing the music thing. So when I got the Jules gig, um, I was already in London. I just moved to London. I was playing jazz, so I was super happy doing that, playing with improvising musicians, playing creative music. But then getting the Jules gig, and Jules wasn't who he is back then, like that he is now. He didn't have his TV show or his radio shows. He wasn't the Jules Holland back then in '91 that we know now. So when I got the gig with him, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this guy is like super famous, and if I play with him, I'll get to do this and that, because he'd only just left Squeeze um, to start a solo career. But then, but very quickly, like a year later, he got his TV shows. And that's when I was getting the call to come in and to play with all of these iconic, legendary musicians. And I thought to myself, just when I thought things couldn't get any better, because I was already happy and enthusiastic about being a musician. I've always loved it. And then all of a sudden, I'm on the TV playing with Eric Clapton and BB King and whoever, and I'm thinking, wow, I did not expect this to happen.
wow.
So it's having a gig like that. It definitely keeps you very enthusiastic. It keeps you motivated, um, and also because I didn't do well at school. I wasn't a very good student. I didn't study. I wasn't studious at all, apart from playing an instrument. So it's almost like I've been trying to make up for lost time. I've been trying to compensate for making a mess of my education. So like now I'm always studying. I'm always sort of during the day I'll practice. I'll practice my tuba, my trombone, the bass. I'll read. Maybe try play a bit of piano. I always want to be self-motivating all of the time. And especially now that I've become a parent so late in life. My son, my first ever child. He's 7 now. So I need to still have that level of enthusiasm for not just for music, but I guess for life really, because
Sure.
he's going
Yeah.
to pick up on that from me. I want him to not make the mistakes I did when I was young. I want him to have that inspiration that I can give him. So yeah, it's important for me to keep learning, to keep evolving. studying, improving, anything I can do to make me a better musician and a better human being. Really, very important for me.
What is your relation to? I have two questions actually. The first one is what's your relation to uh, bowing and playing the bow on upright bass?
Okay, okay. Well, that's a good question. So when I took up double bass at um, so I would have been 15. I took up bass guitar and double bass pretty much at the same time. And as I said to you, I couldn't find a teacher anywhere. They may have been around, and if they were any around, they were orchestral players, but I couldn't find them. So I bought two key books that were out at the time. There weren't many double bass books, but one of them was the Samandel bass method, which most bass players know, and it's often called the double bass Bible.
Yes.
Oh, that's right, because I did find someone. He was a vicar. He was a double bass playing vicar, and I went to play for him. I literally hadn't got a clue what I was doing, and he's the one that told me to get the Samandel book. He said because that's where you'll learn the fingerings from. And he said, but what do you ultimately want to be playing? You know, he said, do you want to be an orchestral player? And I said, not particularly. I said, I want to be playing jazz and popular music on it. And I said, do you have any advice on that? And he sort of said, go and buy a load of Frank Sinatra records and play along with Frank. That's what he said to me. That's what me. So that was that. And then there was a book. It's still available now, but this was the original copy. It was the Ray Brown bass method. From the famous, the great Ray Brown, jazz American bass player, one of my heroes. So I had those two books, and I was listening to Frank Sinatra. Now the thing is, obviously, I knew about the bow. I knew about it, but I thought to myself it wasn't that important for me because I knew that what I wanted to be playing was more jazz, swing stuff. So pizzicato was what it was about. So that's what I started to do. I had a bow, but I wasn't doing anything with it, and I didn't have a teacher, so I didn't have someone saying to me, "You've got to use this." But then my trombone teacher, who would book me for shows, musicals, theatre, pit work, and stuff, the things that he was booking me for, you had to use a bow. There was no question about it. So, and it was a French bow that I had at the time. So I'm talking, I was like 15 or 16 by this stage. So again, I'm looking at in the book and it's showing you how to hold it. But there's only so much you can learn from a book. And I think I eventually found some orchestral or an orchestral double bass player who gave me a couple of bowing lessons.
Oh, yeah.
So I then was playing, but for me, I was never fully comfortable with using a bow when I was a kid. It didn't feel. I would much rather be playing pizzicato. But anyway, I had to use it, so that was that. Now, fast forward years later, when I got the Jules gig, Jules never asked me to use the bow or anything like that. So again, it ceased to be important. But here's a key thing. And this actually might be just before I got the Jules gig. So this was late 80s, maybe 1990. There was a very famous American jazz bass player was living in London. He came over and he's still with us, I'm pleased to say. He's not here in London anymore, but he was for a while. And his name is Michael Moore, Moore.
Michael Moore, that's a wonderful player.
Oh my goodness, Michael is just, and he's like, I think he's pretty much retired now, but he's got a new YouTube channel and he's playing solo double bass on there. Now, unfortunately, I've lost contact with him, which I'm sorry to say. And his last gig was with Dave Brubeck, bearing in mind, that was his last gig. Now, so when I heard in the late 80s, early 90s that Michael Moore was in London and he was giving lessons, and I thought, I've got to go and see him. I have to study with this guy because what a beautiful, lyrical, melodic player and known for being a great technician with the bow. So I linked up with him and I went to study with him at his home. I had private lessons, one-to-one lessons, and one of the first things he got me to do was to switch bows because Michael always played German bow,
Yeah.
and at that I hadn't played German at all at that point. And because he'd studied the Ludwig Streicher method, which was all German bow, and so I made the switch, and then he gave me some bowing lessons, and the German bow to me felt so right, and I was kind of annoyed with myself. I had not made the switch earlier because it just felt way more natural to me. Someone did say, I heard someone say once that if you've got longer arms, the German bow is better for people with longer arms. I don't know
There are
how
pros.
true that is, but
There are pros and cons, of course.
yeah,
But I did the same thing. Actually, I started out on French, but my teacher told me I think you should find a German-based teacher.
yeah, the German bow for me feels much more natural. So I studied with Michael. So he was, but I was studying a lot of stuff. So he was giving me German bow lessons, which was great. Um, but also we were talking about improvisation, and we were, and he made me play piano. He said to me, he said, because I said I want to improve my improvisational soloing skills, and he sort of said you should get some piano chops. He said because this will be massively helpful, and he played really nice piano himself. So he had one in the house, and I could play a tiny bit. I could play some chords and stuff, but nothing special. But I ended up during the part of the lesson with Michael Moore. I ended up me trying to comp on piano with this giant of jazz, this world-renowned jazz double bass player, and I'm playing piano with Michael Moore, and I'm thinking, this is very strange. how did I get into this situation? But
Oh,
he was really sweet as well because I said to him I didn't have a keyboard at home, and he had a small electronic keyboard. It might have even been a Casio or something like that, and he gave it to me. He gave it to me so I could take back to my flat, and I could practice, and he would give me chord inversions and whatever. So he was stressing the importance of having some piano skills and piano knowledge. And I often say this to people as well, because there's a lot of bass players that I know, younger guys, and they went straight to the bass. They didn't play any other instruments. And I've already mentioned how, for me, the benefit of playing brass instruments was helpful, especially the trombone, than when I switched to bass. But really, if you're talking about the understanding of harmony and music theory, you cannot beat having some piano skills, or even the guitar, perhaps. So I always encourage people to do that anyway. I mean, I'm still a terrible piano player. My son Oscar, who's 7, who's studying the instrument, he's a better piano player than I am. But I do play some guitar. I'm a better guitarist than I am a pianist. But that was Michael's main encouragement. And also, I said, well, what else can I do, Michael? He said, listen to Frank Sinatra records.
the circle
And
will be.
I said, you're not the first person that's told me that. You know. So I think he meant, and obviously both of them, the double bass playing vicar. I think what they were saying was, obviously listen to the music because you're going to learn the songs if you play along with the tunes, but just also Frank's his own voice, the phrasing, the melodicism in his voice. So there's a
Yes.
lot to be learned, I think, from that.
Yes. Yes. So you mentioned before we put on the recording, you mentioned that you are going on a short tour with Jules.
Yeah,
What do you bring?
that's a good question. So, well, here's what happened. When I first got the Jules gig, I only played double bass, solely double bass for the first 2 or 3 years. But this was way back in the early '90s, and what the problem for me there was the amplifying the instrument. the feedback of it was a nightmare, because it was a loud band and we were playing in big venues, noisy venues, and it was a real struggle for me. And I hadn't played double bass at those volumes before. Before I got the Jules gig, I was just playing in small clubs with a little Polytone amp, a little Polytone Mini Brute 3 amp, which I've still got from when I was 17 or something. But all of a sudden, I'm playing on these big stages, very, very loud volume. And it was a struggle. And eventually, I ended up with a magnetic pickup on the end of my double bass fingerboard, like a precision, an EMG split precision pickup.
Yeah.
And the great thing there was, it was I could get the double bass louder before it fed back. The only thing is, I had to use metal strings to work with a magnet. Which I don't like, you know. So anyway, what happened is eventually it became such a struggle amplifying the instrument that I said to Jules, you know, can I play a stick bass, a skeletal electric upright bass? And that's what happened really. So for the tours, I ended up mostly using an electric upright and a bass guitar as well, and I would alternate depending on what the song was. If we were playing something a bit more pop or a bit more rocky or funky, I'd grab the bass guitar, but everything else I would play electric upright bass. Now, over the years, technology has changed the way we listen to what we do on stage, the way we perform. So the great thing is that in more recent years, well, 15 years ago, Jules requested the volume on stage comes down because it was getting out of hand. It's a big horn section, it's a 5-piece rhythm section, a lot of volume. So Jules wanted the volume reduced. So Gilson, our drummer, he got rid of those big side fills, you know, that drummers used to have, looked like a PA speak on the side there. So that went. Yeah. And then Gilson, our drummer, started to use in-ear monitors and one of those drum thrones that vibrate. When you hit the drum kit, it vibrates.
Yeah.
So then Jules was requesting me to turn my rig down as well. He wanted that lower, as did the front of house guy. Now, but when I was doing that, I'm thinking, I can't hear it. I can't hear what I'm playing because I was missing the movement of air from the speakers. So what I did, I started to use in-ears, in-ear monitors. I use Ultimate Ears UE11s, very, very good. I've used them for 15 years. And I started to use them and thought, wow, this is amazing. What I was hearing was the fidelity, the separation of instruments. I was hearing instruments I hadn't heard before. I was hearing BVs I'd never heard. And I'm thinking,
you know, the band was that big, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know it's true. It's true. I'm loath to admit it, but there's some parts that I'd never heard before. But here's the thing, though. By putting the in-ears in, I felt very isolated from the band. So in other words, I could hear the bass very, very well, better than ever, but I couldn't feel the bass. I couldn't feel what I was playing. So then the same company that made Gilson's drum throne, which is a British company called Porter and Davis, they were making a bass platform, which we've talked about. And they asked me, would you go out on tour with all these prototypes?
Yeah.
And we'll get your feedback. So for about 2 years, I did this. And eventually I got, you know, I was using the commercial one. But so now when I'm using in-ears, I've got the platform there, which makes your body feel like you're playing in front of a much louder rig. It's making your body vibrate like you would do if you had a big 8x10 behind you or something like that. So, but luckily, we have got our own working crew with us. You know, so all of this stuff gets taken with the crew and they set everything up because it's quite an elaborate setup. Now, here's the thing, because I'm more self-contained now than I was when I first got the Jules gig. Now I've got in-ears, I've got the platform. My Bergantino rig is relatively low. What this has meant is I've been able to bring back my double bass for the tours. So because the problem way back was because I was having to turn the rig so loud that the instrument would feed back, and it doesn't anymore. Everything's more controlled now. So everyone's happier. I'm happier playing an actual real double bass uh, than the stick instrument. Jules is happier because he loves the sound of it. He loves the look, the whole aesthetic of the bass. It fits in with what we do. So, but the other thing is, um, I don't have a flight case for my double bass. I have a flight case for the electric upright,
Yeah.
which is a slim flight case. But I've never had an actual double bass flight case. So when we go on this trip to Europe next week, um, a couple of us are going to be in a car. We've got a car. We're driving over there. So my double bass will be coming with me in the car in a gig bag. That will be my Stentor bass. But I believe that the crew, the other end, they've located a flight case for me. They've bought one or found one or borrowed one, whatever. And it's not like a shaped fiberglass thing. It's actually like a box, like a traditional metal wood flight case.
I think that the boxers are coming more and more because they are easy to pack, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what he said to me. He said, listen, he said, I prefer it if you didn't get one that was shaped. He said, because all of the gear that goes in the huge truck that we have, all the flight cases are rectangular
Exactly. Yeah.
things. So it's like a game of, was it like Jenga or Tetris, whatever you call it? You know, everything has to fit in like a jigsaw puzzle.
Of course.
So apparently, I'm just hoping that the flight case that they've got
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going to, you know, I think we'll have to pad it out with some foam around the edges, but it should fit. So that's the great news for me now, because I have, over the years, I've missed playing my real double bass. The EUB has been very useful
Of
because
course.
they're easy to transport. They don't feed back. Uh, what the one I use fell off the stage a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, it hit Jules's brother Christopher on the head, where it literally fell off the stage and cut the poor guy's head open. You know, it's like not very. He's okay, I'm pleased to say, but then the bass fell onto the ground. Now, if that would have been a real acoustic double bass, that thing would have been in a million pieces.
Oh, yeah, probably.
But
Yes.
because the EUB, it was pretty solid, it survived. But you know, just the physicality of having that acoustic body
Oh,
next to you and the
yeah.
sound and the feel of it is
Completely.
you can't match that.
Yes, I will put the link to Porter and Davis as well in the comments. I think it's very interesting, the solution. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. To be honest with you, when I'm on tour with Jules now, I couldn't imagine not using that combination of in ears and the platform. You know, and there's sometimes we've done gigs when there's been so when we do Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club in London, we occasionally do that with a full band, and there isn't room for a bass rig at all. It's so small in there, and the band is so large. So I end up doing the gig with my in ears and the platform, and that's it.
Wow.
Now that obviously for me personally, that's great because I'm self-contained. I've got everything I need. But then what happens then is that Jules will have to have some bass through his wedge monitor on the floor because he doesn't use in ears. So the bass will have to come out somewhere else on stage. It'll have to come out from the. But for me myself, in my own little world, the
Yeah.
in ears and the platform work fine in a situation where I can't have any backline. So
You know, we can speak forever, Dave. I know we could like do a 4 hour session here if we. But I'm thinking we could listen to one thing that has a very special story attached to it, and that is when you played with Paul Simon.
mm.
stepped outside the backstage door to breathe some nicotine. And maybe check my mailbox, see if I can read the screen. Then I heard a click, the stage door lock. I knew just what that meant.
But this song has a special story attached to it, right?
Well, it does, and it's kind of in two parts as well, the story. But what happened is that I got a phone call from either Jules or the BBC saying, we need you to come and play with Paul Simon. He's on Jules's later TV show. And I was very excited because I've always been a big fan of his. When I was a kid, my brothers had Paul Simon albums or Simon and Garfunkel. So I thought, this is great. What a treat this is going to be. But I just assumed that whatever I was going to be playing, the bass part was going to be, fairly pedestrian, traditional, nothing flamboyant. Because most of the time, what I get called to play on that show is nothing. We're not playing Weather Report tunes or Return to Forever songs. So anyway, I received the track, and it was a track called Wristband, which was a track on Paul's new album at the time. I can't remember what it was called, the album, but Wristband was the track. And I'm starting to listen to it thinking, hang on a minute, this is like a double bass and voice feature. There's hardly anything else on there apart from some hand claps. It's all double bass and voice. I'm thinking, wow, this has never happened to me before. So I transcribed the line. I always do that. Whenever I get a track, the first thing I do is meticulously transcribe what the original bass player was playing on the album, just so I've got all the detail there, all the detail. And I started to practice it, and it was in E flat. And I think straight away I'm kind of trying to work out some good fingerings. I'm thinking, oh, this feels lousy. I'm trying to work out good fingerings for it, and I can't. I'm thinking, why is this so uncomfortable? I mean, the first two notes is like a low E flat, which is like the first position on the D string, that one, and the octave above it. So because you have to play that octave immediately, you really need to play the E flat on the A string to get that, And I'm thinking to myself, well, that alone, when you're on a TV show and you've got to keep quiet, and then as soon as I start to play, I've got to hit that E flat in the middle of a double bass fingerboard on the A string.
In the middle of the big dark sea of...
Yeah. It's not like hitting the E flat on the D string, which is close to the nut. You've got to hit that. So, and I'm just thinking, and then the rest of it, and it's all offbeat. It's a very offbeat line. And all the other notes, I'm thinking, oh, God, I cannot find a good way of fingering this. I tried all different ways, all on the fingerboard. And in the end, I picked one that I thought was the best of the worst. I just thought, I don't know how else to make this smooth. But it still felt uncomfortable to me. Didn't feel great about it. So anyway, we got to the TV studio. Paul was there, and I went to take my double bass to the back of the room where I normally stand. And the producer said, no, you've got to come to the front and stand next to Paul, because the feature is you two guys. Yeah. That's what the song is, it's you two. And I was really shocked by this and thinking, wow. So I'm standing right next to Paul himself. And bearing in mind that, I'm probably, we're taller than average guys, and Paul is probably shorter than average. So there was a great height differential. And I know that the cameramen were having a bit of difficulty trying to get us both in the camera shot because of our height difference. But eventually they just pulled out, and it was easy. Anyway, so we start to run through the song. And here's the thing, every time that we played Wristband in the rehearsal, Paul did it slightly differently. He would jump bars, or he'd miss bars out, and he would jump ahead. So sometimes, if there's a 4-bar phrase, Paul would sing it as a 3-bar phrase or a 2-bar phrase. And every time we ran through it, I'm kind of thinking, I had to keep jumping to match what he was singing. So in other words, he didn't sing at the same time. Just like every run through, he was shifting the bars.
Do you think that is something that he wants to do just to amuse himself, or?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And to be honest with you, it's I'm not sure. I think he was like busking. He was just jamming.
Jamming. Yeah.
Yeah, with it, you know. And I had to go with it. I had to listen because there was no point in me playing what was on the record, like the certain rhythmic patterns.
Kind of,
I just literally, yeah, I had to listen to him like so closely and jump. If he missed a bar and jumped over, I had to do the same thing. So it was, as you said, it's all ears. Okay. But every single time we ran through it, he did it slightly differently. I'm thinking, wow, I'm earning my money here. But then in between takes, he would tell me stories about his father was apparently his father was a double bassist. And he was telling me that he has his father's double bass in his office in America. And he was asking about mine. He was saying, wow, that's a beautiful instrument. He was asking where it was made, who made it, how old is it. He was really fascinated with this. And I remember thinking at the time, this is crazy. Before today, I'd never met Paul. He was a hero of mine. And all of a sudden, I'm having this really cool conversation.
oh,
Him asking me about my instrument and my life and whatever. I'm thinking, how has this happened? So, anyways, we did the show and it went really well. And if you look on YouTube at the very end of it, he turns around to me and he shakes my hand on camera.
Yeah.
You know, he gives a big handshake. And we had, I think it's an American band called Lake Street Drive, I think. And they were playing next to us. And they joined in with the hand claps because it's mainly double bass voice and hand claps. And you can see them. They put their instruments down and they did that. Anyways, so that was that, and everybody watched it. Everyone loved it, and loads of people contacted me, said, "Wow, I loved your playing on that." The only thing that kind of bugged me, apart from the key of the song, apart from it being an E flat, which did bug me, the only thing is that I had a pickup on the bass, but I also had a microphone, and I said to the BBC, "Can you make sure that you use less pickup and more mic?" Because I wanted the sound to be warmer, more organic.
yeah.
Less like it was a pickup, more like a microphone. And listening back, I don't think they ended up doing that because to me it just sounds all pickup. It doesn't have much of the microphone.
Yes.
Yeah, it has a piezo pickup, and to me, I wanted them to use more microphone. And I think probably the reason why they didn't is because as soon as you put a microphone in front of double bass, it picks up everything else.
Yeah, a lot of hand claps and stuff.
Yeah, and bass drums and whatever. So that's my only thing. Like sound wise, I wish they'd have put more mic in there, but it is what it is. So, anyways, years later, and I'm pretty sure it was years later, I was discussing this song and the fact it was in E flat, and I'm thinking, oh man, I can't find a good fingering for this. And I can't remember if it might have been online. It might have even been on Facebook or something like that. And unbelievably, the guy that played the bass, the double bass on the original track with Paul Simon, which is, I think it's the pronunciation is Carlos Henriquez.
Carlos Enriquez, yes.
Yeah. So fantastic American jazz double bass player who interestingly has got his own brand of Parastro strings. He uses gut strings and he has his own signature set. So I was very, very aware of him, but we'd never spoken, we'd never interacted. And he joined in on this chat online, and he revealed to me that he was the bass player on Wristband, the original Paul Simon track that I had to learn and play. And I said, "Oh wow, that's so great." I said, "Beautiful line, fantastic." And I said to him, "But why E flat?" I said, "It was just so tricky." He said, "It wasn't in E flat." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We recorded it in D. The original key was in D, and that's what I played it in." He says,
fingering, yes.
But Paul wasn't happy with the tempo. So they changed the speed of it. And changing the speed of it put it into a different key. So the original key that Carlos played it in was in the key of D. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he told me this online, I went to my double bass and I picked it up and I played the bass line to wristband. And it was easy as pie. It was so simple. And it felt great. And the thing is, because of course, the first thing is you've got the open D and then the octave. And then I think at some point you got the open G as well. So all of a sudden, it all made sense. But and he said, I felt really sorry for you, man. He said, because I got to play it in the easy key. Well, easy for double bass fingering. And he said, and you got to play it in E flat. And I said, oh my God, that's why I was having a hard time trying to find a good fingering pattern for it, you know. So it wasn't even in E flat originally. So I got the raw end of the deal.
Well, it's
No, but it was still a joy to play. It was still a pleasure. But to me, once I realised what had happened, I thought, oh wow, if I'd have got to play it in D as well, it would have made. And the thing is, and we could have done it in D because Paul wouldn't have probably noticed the difference in that semitone. The only reason why the key changed was because of they changed the speed of the tape on the album. So if I'd have known that the original was in the key, I could have just said to Paul, listen, do you mind if we do it in D because it's easier to play on the upright? But I didn't know. I thought to myself, it's got to be in E flat because that's what's on the record.